you're going to say this yourself. Thrilled to know that from the Fisher Gallery, she's actually going to go on to the Art League and have a completely new body of work on exhibition there and be a visiting artist. Right. So it's quite an achievement. Anyway, so here we are, Megan Coyle.
All right. Well, thank you for coming out today. It's great to see everyone here. And I thought I'd get started talking a little bit about how I started working on collage. I actually started making figurative collages back when I was in high school. Although back then the pieces were much simpler, I used fewer magazine strips. And I also experimented with paper. And I focused a lot more on color as opposed to trying to make more of a painterly collage piece. And I also had a tendency of drawing on top of the collages with oil pastel. And I remember a couple of people had asked me, why do you keep drawing on top of all this hard work you've done with, you know, all the collage pieces you've cut down and glued down? And when I thought about it, I realized that it was just out of habit. I took all these drawing courses and painting courses, and I was just used to using some sort of tool to make that mark on the page. So then I decided to start seeing what I could do with just working with magazine strips. And so this body of work here shows you, you know, my work with focusing on that specifically. And also, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of my influences, as well as the direction that I'd like to head in next. In college, I studied painting, and that's really influenced my collage work. I remember just learning about a lot of the great artists from art history, and I took a liking to Impressionist and Post-Impressionist artwork. And I was really drawn to the distinct brushstrokes that those artists used. And so when I approached painting on my own, I really liked using distinct brushstrokes as opposed to really blending in the colors. And I continued to work on collage outside of those courses, and I noticed that it sort of translated over to my collage work, my painting technique. And so if you look at some of these pieces, you'll see how I've cut out these rectangular shapes that almost look like they could be distinct brushstrokes when you're far away from them, although when you get up close you can really tell that they're bits and pieces of magazines. I also studied creative writing in school, and I've been really interested in narrative scenes and being able to tell a story with images. And so this interest in storytelling is something that I also wanted to focus on. And so with this series, I wanted to see how I could create scenes with the figures interacting with the environment around them, where viewers can look at the piece and kind of come up with their own idea of what they think the figure is saying, doing, or thinking. With collage, I'm really drawn to this medium because I like how flexible it is. I start out with gluing down the pieces of paper with a glue stick, an acid-free glue stick. And so that way I can pick up pieces and sort of move them around until I get them in the right place, and then once I'm finished with a piece, I'll varnish it with a UV protective varnish. I also like the element of surprise with collage. I page through magazines and try and find textures and colors to use. And I'm never really quite sure what I'll find, and so that's also a great interest to me, just this element of surprise. I'm not sure what I'll come up with. A couple of my major influences when I was studying art were a couple of painters, contemporary art painters. And one of them is Chuck Close. And Chuck Close is a portrait painter. He creates these large portraits, and some of them, when you get up close to them, you'll notice that he's used a grid. And in each square of the grid, he uses circles and squares of color. So it looks almost like you've zoomed into a photograph, and you can see the pixels of the photograph. And I was really intrigued with this idea of taking one medium, like painting, and making it kind of resemble something else, like photography. And that's something that I've been interested in with my own work, something that I want to focus in on, being able to take one medium and make it look like another one. Another artist who has been a major influence on my own work is a painter named Gerhard Richter. And I was really taken by a series of paintings he did that resembled photographs. He tried to capture the imperfections of the medium, the blurriness, and the glares that that medium can capture. And I was just very taken by that, and with this series, as you can tell, I've been trying to make the pieces look painterly and have that element of letting the viewer kind of question what the work is made of, what materials I've used. And the inspiration for this particular series, I kind of took a look at the work that I was doing before and tried to get an idea of the direction that I wanted to go into next. Previously, I did a series of up-close portrait pieces, kind of like that one in the back over there that you see. A lot of the pieces were very, they kind of had a similar composition. The sitter was either on the left or right of the page, and they all had really thoughtful, serious expressions. And so when I was looking at this series, I wanted to kind of experiment more with the figure, try and look at the different angles of figures and try to work them in more with the environment around them. Kind of like pieces like this, where the environment also plays a major role and it's not really forgotten or pushed back into the background of the page. And to give you a little idea of the process that I go through when I make these pieces, they all start out with a sketch. The amount of detail in the sketch depends on the composition that I start out with. Pieces like this, where the background is very complex, I had a tendency of spending more time on putting down that sketch, whereas other pieces like this one right here, I just wanted a basic understanding of where everything would be laying out. And once I start collaging, I work in the details later. After I sketch out a piece, well, actually I use photographs for the references for all of these pieces. And I don't work from life because I wouldn't be able to really capture the immediacy of these scenes, especially if there's movement going on. And so by using the photographs as references, I'll put down the sketch, and then I'll start paging through magazines and just tearing out pages based on the colors or textures, and start cutting out shapes of color that I see for shadows and highlights. And I get an idea of the types of shapes of colors that I want to cut out from using those photograph references. I'll see the shadows that fall in those photographs, although I only use the photographs as a guide. I'm not really trying to mimic what's going on in the scene. I'll sometimes make up the colors in certain areas as I go along, but it gives me that idea of where I want to go. And so gradually I just start piecing together the pieces, gluing them down. I start out with the background first, focusing more attention on that. That way it's really pushed back into the background when I collage on top of it. So the foreground, these pieces are overlapping the background. And then eventually, after layering all the pieces up together, I get the finished product, the finished collage. Yeah. After all that time. And so I'm currently working on another series of portraits, as well as some animal portraits. Although in the future I kind of want to head in a little different direction than what I'm currently doing. I want to start working on a larger scale possibly. And in the next few months I'm thinking of experimenting with animation and collage. And seeing how I can make a collage specifically to scan it, put it in the computer, and animate it myself.